All right, these notes are really not anything elaborate. This is just things that you need to work on memorizing, things that you need to build into your memory bank. And some of these we've already done, so they should look familiar. The first one we have is 1/3. So I'm just going to put some color on these. Whoops. Let's do highlighter. There we go. Switch to highlighter mode. There we go. All right, so 1/3. That could look like the fraction, of course. That could also look like 0.333 dot dot dot. And then we're also going to write it as a percentage. So we have 33.33%. Now it goes on forever, but we usually just write 2 3s and then we're done. All right, so then I'm going to do, let's say, blue for 1/2. So it's a good idea if you color code these, and that kind of helps your brain like organize them. All right, 1/2 obviously looks like this. That's simplest form. As a decimal, that could look like 0.5. But remember, that's the same thing as 0.50. All right, so we can always tack on an extra 0 at the end, but they're still the same thing. 0.5, 0.50, no difference. And then that, of course, would also be 50%. And don't forget, just because it has 1/2, there's other fractions that are the same as 1/2, like 2/4. That's the same as a half, and 5/10. That's the same as a half. So there's lots of stuff that's the same as 1/2. All right, then we have 1/4, which is also called 1/4. It's nice knowing if that means 1/4, because then you can think of a quarter, like an actual like quarter, you know, that we use to pay things with. All right, so 1/4 will look like that, but if you haven't memorized that a fourth is also called a quarter, you can think a quarter is worth 25 cents. So 1/4 and 0.25 are the same thing, and that would also be the same thing as 25%. So all of these are the exact same thing. All right, then we have 2/3. So I'm going to get a different color here. Let's do green for 2/3. And switch this pen color. All right, so 2/3 would look like this. All right, now the good news is if you look above it, 1/3 was 0.3 repeating, right? So if you double that, it would just be all 6s. So 2/3 is 0.6 repeating, and that would be 66.66%. So if you can memorize the 1/3, then you can do the 2/3 because it's just double. Right? 33 and 33 make 66. All right, then we have 1/5. That one's the one that's new to us. We've only done that a couple times, so let's see if we can find a different color here. Here we go, that's what I want. Let's do a purple, like purple. All right, 1/5. That one will be purple. All right, so 1/5 will look like 1/5, of course. But we have to remember that is the same thing as, say, 2/10, because if you just double both of them, you get 2 and 10. And the reason I try to get you guys to remember that is because it's easy to turn tenths into decimals. 2/10 is 0.2, right? 1 decimal place is a tenth, so 2/10. That's the same thing as 0.20. Right? The 0 at the end doesn't change what it is, so it's still 0.2, it's 2/10 either way. And that's the same thing as 20%. So 1/5 is 20%, it's 0.20. Then we have 1/9. Get a different color going here. Let's do orange. So 1/9 is going to, of course, be 1/9. So we'll do the fraction first. We've only done that one a couple times too. That is just 0.1 repeating. Dot, 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 dot. And we even learned a trick with that. So like if you have like 8/9, you're just kind of multiplying this by 8. So well, 1 times 8 is just 8. So it'd just be 0.8 repeating. And 7 over 9 is just 0.7 repeating, dot, dot, dot. So the ninth trick is just, it just repeats, that's all. And then if we were to turn that into a percentage, it would be 11.11%. All right, then we have 3/4, so get a new color going here. Let's do yellow for this one. Again, another word for fourths is quarters. Okay, we want to know both those words. All right, so we can have 3/4 like that. If you actually had 3 quarters in your pocket, you have 75 cents. So 0.75 is the decimal value, and that's the same thing as 75%. All right, 1/10 is 1 out of 10. And maybe we should change this. Let's use black for this one. That means 0.1. And that's how we pronounce it, 1/10. It's tenths, hundredths, thousandths, tenth. And then that's the same thing as 10%. See, that's helpful. So if you get something like 3/10, well, that's just 0.3. 4/10, that's just 0.4. 7 out of 10, that's just 0.7. Because you're just taking that and you're just timesing it by 3, timesing it by 4, timesing it by 7. So just got to memorize 1/10 is 0.1. Now sometimes kids are like, well, Mrs. Stultz, this says 0.1 and this says 0.1. No, this is 0.10 and this guy is 0.111 repeating. So they are different. They're very close because 9 and 10 are pretty close, but they are slightly different. All right, so they are actually different numbers. All right, and then the number 1. So obviously, this is the easiest way to write the number 1. If we were to turn that into a fraction, we could make that 1/1. You can also take a different number and put it over itself. 4/4, 3/3, 10/10, so on. All of that is the same thing as 1. If you want to turn 1 into a percent, you swing the decimal 2 times, fill in some zeros. So 1 is the same thing as 100%. And then if you wanted to write it as a decimal, well, $1, right, would be 1.00. All right, so whole numbers are just like dollar bills. All right, so I want you just to look over this each day, and you got to practice memorizing, you know, what each one is as a fraction, a decimal, and a percent. We got to have these built up in our memory because on your next quiz and test, you're not going to be allowed to use a calculator. All right, so no calculators. We have to have these memorized, all of them. So start looking over them every day. All right, let them become your new friends.